Hey, it's me, Grzegorz from Artur's of Code podcast. In this episode, Artur, Marek and myself share our views and experiences with different forms of so-called knowledge sharing on levels of organizations, teams and individuals. Some of the ideas can be implemented by you in a matter of hours. Some of them will require more time and alignment with the surrounding organization. But all of them are worth giving a try. We'd like to encourage you to implement such initiatives as we consider them as great means for both professional development and ensuring that your projects or products succeed. If you find these pieces of information useful, leave us a comment under the episode on Twitter, Facebook or LinkedIn. And if you're new to the show, consider subscribing to our channels over YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any podcasting app of your choice. This way, we'll stay in touch and you won't miss any updates. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Artistry of Code podcast, where we, together with our guests, are seeking ways of doing things right and having fun with it.
Software, architecture, soft skills, teamwork, and other crazy buzzwords.
Are you ready? Let's bring more value to the business.
First things first, let's recap the last 2 weeks. Marek, can you lead on?
Yes, I can. This time I will be the construction guy, as I've spent last 2 weeks mostly focused on stuff related to the construction of my house, as the floor screed is already drying for quite a while. I have to agree on all other decoration details, let's say. So I've spent a lot of time recently on stuff like that. But also I am traveling to the first on-site since I've started working at Urbans to Brussels. And on top of that, it's the first flight since the COVID started. So pretty exciting time. I feel like I'm going to fly for the first time again. And that's mostly it for my last 2 weeks. Artur, what about your construction?
Yeah, I feel like it's enough for me with all those construction side stuff. Every day is a struggle now. So I would like to focus rather on more professional topics. And something that caught my eye is a way of versioning that I didn't have an opportunity to work with previously. So previously, when I had the APIs and RESTful API, for example, I remember that we used the versioning at the very beginning of the URL. So it was like v1 and then the address of the resource. But now I saw the approach when the versioning is applied to each resource independently. So I have the address of the resource and then the versioning, and I find it very useful, very agile, and it works very well in our use cases. Yeah, it makes it possible to easily change things around without need to like implement everything once again or do some mappings from v2 to v1, etc. So what did you guys met with this before, and what do you think about it? Because I'm quite excited.
Yeah, so this reminds me about one presentation which I was attending on the Free Developers conference a couple of years ago. The team responsible for the Gwent Witcher trading card game who were developing the backend there, and they were describing the versioning challenges that they were facing in running that backend server. And they had a fairly similar approach to the one which you've described. And then they were passing two versions in the query strings in the URLs. So they had they did it because they had to differentiate the resources on one hand by the version of the resource itself. So you could have a card with some powers like AB, and then there was a patch to that card, like a nerf or something. So the parameters of that card changed. So this is the very same card, but it has different parameters. So that's the way they dealt with that. And also there was something related to versioning of the clients. So if that was PS4 or a PC, or something else like a phone, and then they were passing this there as well, and that was most likely important for matchmaking. So you have people with the equal versions of the data sets and the applications paired together for games, right? And I'm just curious whether the way you've described has any additional benefits, or does it solve something? But I guess then I'll have to do some readings about this as well, because I find this concept also interesting, and I never heard about this before. So thanks for sharing.
I have to ask Artur if you are using any specific framework for this, or it's kind of in-house solution.
No, it's rather in-house solution, and it's quite easy because it's another endpoint in the API. So it can be like another method in your controller. So it's very easy to implement there. Yeah, and regarding what you said, Grzegorz, if it has any benefits, I think that the way you pass the version is just a way to achieve it. Like the pattern is the same, but if you put it as a suffix in the address, or you put it in a HTTP a header, or you put it as a query string parameter, it actually doesn't really matter, yeah, because the approach is here what it counts. So approach to version the resource, not the whole API, and that is something I wanted to bring here. Okay, Grzegorz, but tell us what has happened in your last 2 weeks.
So as for me, most of the things happened really in the past couple of days. So this weekend I was participating as a listener in the Bowling Frogs conference here in Wrocław. The whole event was really, really cool. It definitely met my expectations when it comes to the people, the lineup, and the subjects. So I will also definitely participate next year. But besides that, that might be a surprise to all the people know me from quite a time. But I started to learn F sharp. So this is the .NET based programming language, not so popular, but very, very powerful. And I'm trying to utilize my functional programming knowledge with this particular language, because I tried to do it with JavaScript based on some books from the past. But I kind of didn't want to go into those FP frameworks for JavaScript, which were trying to, like achieve functional programming concepts like monads, option types, stuff like that. And I rather wanted to use a language which is based on those concepts and has them in syntax. So right now I've started a crash course about this. That's the beginner series to F Sharp by Luis Quintanilla, and yeah, definitely looking forward to utilizing this as a scripting language at least. To do some modifications, some tools, which I'm doing today in Node.js, really, like CSV parsing and calculating sums of amounts of money from my bank account, for instance. Yeah, that's one of the use cases. So I'm having like a CSV with bank transfers, and I want to do some quick analysis. Today I'm doing this using the Node.js, but I'm planning to do it with F Sharp. So that's pretty much it.
That's good that you started with a proper training course rather than trying to learn it on yourself. I feel like it's with learning how to swim. It's better to start with a proper course rather than trying it on your own, because you don't need to unlearn things that you previously hard-coded into your head. So props, good for you.
So the only difficulty which I see here is that the resources about the language are quite limited. I mean, there's the official documentation, there's that crash course, and I was looking at the packed subscription which I have for books, and the last publication there was, I believe, 2018 or even earlier than that. So it kind of explains why the language is probably not so popular, I would say, because we would have way much more publications. But I saw that Stack Overflow is already filled with with people working with the language, so I guess I'm going to be okay in the long run.
Yes, a number of the questions regarding some topics on the Stack Overflow is pretty important metric these days. Yeah.
That's the so-called community support, right? So you need to have that when you choose a technology. Remember, check this metric. But then again, moving to the main subject for today. So today we wanted to talk about knowledge sharing, but we are going to talk about this on like two levels of altitude. First of all, we're going to go higher and talk about how this might be done in organizations across multiple teams, for an instance, and then we'll try to land down to that coding level where we can identify how particular individuals can work with knowledge sharing. So I know that Artur, you wanted to start off on the highest altitude. So how this can be done across organizations and multiple teams.
Okay, for start, I wanted to focus on knowledge sharing between teams, how to deliver a valuable piece of code, having multiple teams. I remember some time ago I was working in an organization that decided to introduce a SAFe framework, which is Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprise, and it was we had like every quarter a year, a meeting with the whole company, with the business side and all teams gathered together in one office, and it was like a workshop, 2 days long, and the target of that workshop was to prepare a plan for the whole company to deliver a goal stated by the business. And I think it was very valuable in terms of the knowledge sharing, because we were there all together. We were presented the goal in detail for everyone, so everyone had the equal knowledge of what we want to achieve. Everyone could take a look at this topic from his perspective as a team A, or from the different team perspective. And what was also very crucial in that process was that after this presentation, we had to first focus on our part of the job. So first we needed to identify this part of the job that belongs to the team A, for example. Next, prepare some kind of plan. Then the representatives of each team was visiting different teams with our draft of the plan to check how we can cooperate, if we have some cooperation required, if we see some solutions to cooperate in the same way or a different way. So we could have a quick discussion on some architectural designs and approved solutions. And we knew from the very beginning what are our dependencies. And this was very good for planning, because we could like sort things in right order to have everything in the state of ready to start development.
So how the way you've described this is pointing to the fact that this definitely helps in aligning things and aligning teams, right? So in terms of sharing the knowledge, I guess at this point you're learning more about how do you depend on others. The other thing which you learn is high level objectives provided by the business and how this is impacting your day-to-day work. Is there anything else which you see as valuable in the context of knowledge sharing and applying SAFe?
it's not only a knowledge sharing of high level. We used also to agree on some draft protocol between parts of the product. In general, the value was that we knew what the other teams are going to do at given moment of the quarter, yeah? Even in a single sprint. So we were up to date from the very beginning, and knowing what the other teams will do. So it like reduced the risk of meeting in the different places. Yeah, just like you could see memes from the internet, like on the Chinese bridges. Yeah, when they started from two shores building it, and it didn't meet. So yeah, that was a way of reducing that risk to meet at the right place in the middle of the river.
Yeah, this sounds like a very good alignment ensuring tool. I'm just curious from your experience, because I wasn't working with Safe. I've just only heard about it, read about it just a little bit. Is it effective? Was it effective? I mean, how many times you've stumbled in the situation that actually, even though you did it, you didn't build that bridge?
I think it was quite effective, but the main problem that we had, especially at the very beginning, was that to start with Safe, you need to prioritize things well. So we need to know what is the goal and what can be skipped, because when you plan at first, it's easy to prepare the plan that we're gonna deliver everything, yeah. But when time comes, another details pop up, and you need to have this tail that you can cut without the risk of not delivering the main goal. And the problem I remember was at the beginning was that we had, for example, 40 points delivered by the business, what they want to have delivered, and 38 of 40 had the highest priority. So it was fun to pick which one will be actually delivered and what we can cut, because because the first response was always everything is important. We need to deliver everything. So it was hard to start, but with time, quarter after quarter, it got better. I don't remember big failures. I think that in terms of the whole organization and knowledge sharing between business and developers, and influence the solution, I think that was the best so far I've seen.
Yeah, that sounds something that definitely could be tried out. If not for a complete big organization, perhaps even 2 teams or 3 teams, when they have like a feature to develop all together, they may do a similar thing on a way much smaller scale. So I think our listeners can benefit from that very, very early on. The other thing which I have on my mind when it comes to sharing the knowledge on the organizational level is doing internal hackathons. Actually, we participated in internal hackathons quite a number of times. And I find this also as a way of sharing knowledge, because if that's an internal hackathon, you're most likely going to stay within your domain or at the edge of your domain when it comes to your day-to-day work. And this brings a lot of fun, because most likely you will be able to develop something which you always wanted to develop as part of working for the company, like a tool or a script, which is going to be very helpful for the people around. So this will require you to learn more about the people for which you want to solve the problem. Sometimes the hackathons are being given a problem, right? So as a consequence, the organization brings those interested developers onto the same page when it comes the company is facing a problem, or our customers are facing a particular problem, and then we can do that exploring. And sometimes the hackathon organizers can provide a lot of input, a lot of information or documentation which is relevant in the domain. And for me, that's the level in which the hackathons serve as a knowledge sharing, a way of knowledge sharing, really. But there's one additional component in it, and which is the fact that in the hackathons, most likely you're able to use any technology which you wanted to use. And if on the team you're having a guy who, for instance, knows Nest.js, but the other people don't necessarily know it, we frequently had the situations on the teams, yeah, at least the ones which I was participating in, that the guy who was an expert in that particular component or framework or language was essentially teaching somebody during the hackathon how to do it. So you had that little mentor-mentee situation there. So it was actually very beneficial for those people participating in the hackathon, even though they weren't fully ready, because they got a kickstart during the hackathon. And if you have an expert just next to you who's going to sit at the same keyboard with you and help you out, well, that's proper knowledge sharing, in my opinion. And that's teamwork and knowledge sharing altogether.
I would like to also refer a bit to the hackathons, which is the thing that during the internal hackathons, I found it really useful to work with guys from the other teams, like even if we are not really switching the hats completely, we can cooperate on dynamic manner with, for example, mobile guys or just front-end guys or anyone else, basically in a different role. And it can help the way how the hackathon works can really help to understand each other much better, yeah, and the challenges on the different teams. So I found it really, really useful.
Marek, I know that you have some very good experiences with the third option, which we wanted to cover, which is also at the edge of the organizational level, which is the brown bags.
Quite a while ago, I've discovered the lack of the brown bags thing at Urbans, where I work at this moment. And I pushed forward the initiative to start this kind of meetings at our company. And while at the very beginning, I was afraid that there may be not enough interest in this initiative, especially like during the completely remote work. It's not that easy to gather people on the optional meetings. It ended up as a really interesting thing for many of the team members. And people started to propose the topics which they want to present, also even asking for the topics which they cannot present, but they want to hear about it from someone. And we have also the volunteers presenters in the pipeline. So yeah, I found it a good thing because it's the place when we can have like kind of developers breathe. So we can share the knowledge, but we can also like find something maybe interesting, maybe a bit different from the day-to-day work. So it helps to prevent the burnout again. So I see really big value with this kind of knowledge sharing.
So just for our listeners who hear the term for the brown bag for the first time, can you please elaborate? What is this all about?
Yeah, probably the definition will vary from team to team, but usually this is the sort of meeting which is optional. This is usually held around the lunchtime, but this is like the convention probably only, and this is about bringing some the topic maybe not hard related to the daily work, but it's like bring in the brown bag, let's say.
Did you, Marek, on your brown bags, do you remember if those topics were like strictly related to the technologies that you are using, or you let yourself, go into the IT world, let's say, wider?
It depends. We had some meeting which was like 100% strictly related to our code and to our setup. But we had, like, for example, the clean architecture presentation at some point. And we also had the meeting about TypeScript, which I had the pleasure to lead there. And it ended up really interesting because even a lot of people had the experience with TypeScript. A lot of different questions came up, and pretty interesting team-wide discussion at the end of that meeting.
So the thing which I'm jealous of is that when we were running this in the past in a different company, there were very little people willing to participate as speakers or contributing there. So I'm really happy for you that at Urbans you have the situation where people are actually picking things up. That's definitely a way to go. Because then this initiative has the possibility to thrive, really. Otherwise, it won't work. Out of curiosity, are you doing recordings of those sessions? Because that's also something which our listeners can do and utilize as a technique.
Yeah,
of sharing.
we tend to do so, as it often happens that someone cannot join because they have different not optional meeting during that time. Or we are also recording that for future generations to come. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true that not all of people want to participate in optional meetings when there are lots of them already. So I have had an opportunity to take part in some weekly or monthly thing of the whole company that is, of course, mandatory. And on this meeting, everyone can propose its topic that can regard all the teams in the company, and it can be like strictly technical topics, not only the product ones. So it a little bit increased the number, but the question is if it increased the number of people really engaged into that meeting, that wants to listen, not only participate because it's mandatory.
You've reminded me about a story which I heard just in the past 2 weeks, actually. And a friend of ours I was meeting with as part on a party, and we were talking about the situation he was in. That they were having. He was working for a company which was running a hour and a half daily meeting for the whole company. So you can imagine the situation that all the teams had a synchronized daily. So that was a company of hundreds of people, a couple of hundreds. I'm not sure if that was more than 200 or close to 300, but at some point it was the case that they actually had, on a daily basis, they had a 1.5 hour town hall meeting online where only the team leads were really speaking. So not even everybody was there, but the principle or the idea behind was that everybody who's going to dial in, they're going to know what's happening in the company. There's like a full transparency going on, stuff like that. Okay, that's a noble intent. Nobody, doubts about that. But the way of how you execute that intent this way, I see your heads nodding here. It's not the best way if you have like a couple of hundreds people each and every day engaged in such an activity. That's on one hand, that's not super productive, and on the other, it's simply waste of money and time in the end of the day, because and the knowledge sharing part actually doesn't happen because probably people develop the habit of, let's be honest, ignoring the way how this is run. So I would label this as a don't do it this way.
Yeah, it reminds me the watching the parliament sessions on TV. You can spend hours on it, and usually it's worthless because they waste most of the time on some useless tug of war game and talking rather than condensed information from this meeting. So yeah, waste of time. Yeah, but yeah, we talked about brown bags, we talked about hackathon, but I feel that we didn't say a word about the documentation. What do you think, guys? Do you like documentation?
I definitely like a good documentation, and it's really important, I believe, but it's something which we as developers probably don't really love to do that. While in the end, we love to read good documentation, which doesn't really make sense in the end. So yeah, we should always try to document things well. And I found it really useful to me as someone who is developing, for example, some new stuff, and I'm delivering that to the team, to document it well before releasing to the team. Because if I do that later on after the release, I have much less questions received through the channels, because people can read and answer the questions with the documentation instead of spamming me with millions of questions which I already supposed to answer in the docs.
Yeah, I agree that it can work, but the crucial thing here is that other people needs to know where to look for this documentation. And what I wanted to emphasize here, if you have documentation, just remember to keep it in the repository or at least publish automatically as a part of CI. Yeah, and if you really don't need to, don't use Confluence. But in our case, it really worked well, I think, in terms of the description of CI/CD process. So how do you feel, guys? Do you see the good examples of when the documentation is fine and when it's not?
Well, I think that documentation is always important. As you said, it's frequently not the most interesting part of the developer's work. But then again, when we think about the consequences and the impact, there are several important cases where this is super relevant. For instance, we're having the ops guys deploying our stuff. There are some companies that are working this way, and then having some major important configuration environment variables documented in the README file in the repository of the service is a key for success, I would say. Sometimes I was designing changes in the system, and I really value good documentation, which is going to quickly yield me answers to the questions which I might have as a designer, so that I don't have to open the code in order to know whether this service is using Redis or Postgres or Oracle, anything. Without really opening the source files and digging through it. I would love to have those basic informations out. This is also helping to onboard people quite fast. Now, the other thing which I would also see in such a documentation is documenting valuable information about the algorithms used, or super complicated concepts, right? So if you're integrating a new communication protocol, which is a non-standard thing, like let's say that's the CoAP, for an instance, then the chances are that the next developer working on that project is not going to know this protocol very well. So linking all the important resources, a gist of information in the README file of the service is definitely something that should be there. And today, I think we have less and less excuses available of not doing so, because the Markdown syntax, along with the Mermaid JS, which we were mentioning on the fourth episode called Modern Developers Toolkit, those tools are already giving you a lot of possibilities to draw graphs in documentation. So you don't have to go to that ASCII art anymore to show the dependency. You just can use Markdown and Mermaid JS to do it in a text editor, and that's going to work totally fine. So less and less justifications available, and more reasons to actually do it.
I have to defend a bit the knowledge management systems like Confluence or Nuclino or anything like that. As I completely agree to keep the documentation as close as possible to the code, but we have a lot of documentation which is not like strictly related to the part of the code, and this is when these systems really shine, like the guidelines or like really high level concepts which cross-cut many repositories of our organization. So yeah, basically I would say that we should always pick the right tool for the job and this applies also to the documentation.
Oh, that was gold. What you said, Marek. That's true. I totally agree. And when it comes to the written content, we talked about the way of sharing documentation related to the products that we create, to the services that we create. But there is also a way, practice in some companies, how to make a knowledge sharing using the written content about our general programming skills, and it is blog. Some companies run their own blog when its employees can prepare content, publish it, have some marketing around provided by the company, and it is a way firstly to share some interesting concepts that maybe are difficult to introduce on the daily work when you need to deliver stuff that you promised with the whole team. And second thing is it's like a way of promoting your own name on the internet.
One last way, which I at least have on my list, is conducting internal trainings. So this might be initiated by a member of your team. Perhaps there somebody from external team, meaning within your organization, but even outside of it, right? If you know that you have a friend in your past company which is having something valuable to share, I don't think any company would say a no to invite somebody from outside and have this done. And in the past, I was doing a lot of trainings with the teams which I was working on. One of the most memorable ones which I have is the test-driven development and Node.js training. I was even planning to do it for others. So, guys, if you're only interested in having a workshop on TDD and Node.js, I'm pretty open to help you out on that. And this actually reminds me about one practice. I'm not sure how it was called, but I recall an organization to organization way of knowledge sharing. The idea was that the companies were swapping employees for a period of time. So if you had not perhaps direct competitors, but if you had development firms close to one another, they were exchanging developers for a period of time so that those devs can learn something from the other company and vice versa, and then bring some of the practices and knowledge back. I recall, I don't recall where I've read about that, but I do recall that was considered a very efficient thing, because on one hand, you have that knowledge sharing experience. So if you're working in the same industry, that's definitely valuable. But also it has that very interesting effect, which is you don't change a company to change your day-to-day work. So it actually can give a lot of refreshment, especially if you're working for quite a long time in a single company. So I'm not sure if anybody does this today, but I just recall that there was an idea like that.
I remember tries like this, but between the teams of the same company, and it's like pretty straightforward, quite easy to share the knowledge, because it's still a safe environment. But when it comes back to like swapping employees between companies, I think that it might be tricky, because usually we have this loyalty and confidential contracts also signed on. And I wonder, Grzegorz, in this case, how is it resolved? Is it another, they need to, think deeply about what they can say or what they cannot, or it's just solved by another contract? Do you remember this?
I don't remember the exact details, but I was just quickly running through the internet. So I see an article by Fernando Mompo, I guess. That's nearly, I would say, 8 years ago. A couple of days, 8 years ago, he was writing on his blog. There's an article called "Swapping Workers for Innovation." So, and in the article, I see that Google and P&G did that exchange earlier on. So, as far as I recall, P&G are not directly working with IT. So this was inspired, by having some sort of innovation happening. But responding directly to your question, Artur, I believe that if organizations are going into such a job swap, that's most likely a program. So there are some corporate agreements about the conditions, and I would assume that employees are bound on legal grounds to keep the industrial secrecy intact in those cases, unless that's not the target. I mean, I can imagine some cases where you have those job swaps actually to learn about the details, right? So I guess this is settled on the highest levels first, and then people are traveling around.
I wonder if this approach still lives, or it seems to be less popular even than functional programming.
Might be the case. Actually, you've got me interested with that question. I'll do some reading if that's really practiced. Still,
that was very insightful. So we summarized few ways of sharing the knowledge in the company regarding the product knowledge, regarding the general programming knowledge. It is lots of stuff, but guys, we look forward to have some comments from you. How you share your knowledge in your organizations. Tell us in the comment section. You can message us directly. Yeah, we encourage you to tell us how you do this in your companies. That was all that we have prepared for you. Thank you for attendance. Thank you for your time. And it's time to say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Stay safe and bye-bye.
That's all for today. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Visit our page on Facebook and Twitter, leave us a comment under the episode, subscribe to the updates, and share it with others.
We would like to hear your feedback so that we can prepare more interesting content for you to enjoy. Hear you next time!